In the aftermath of the climactic events that bookended the Horus Heresy, the surviving loyalists scrambled to mend the fractures within their now wounded Imperium. Amongst these remaining defenders were the Dark Angels, who at the time had been known for their unyielding loyalty to the Emperor above all else. Yet it seems that amidst the treachery of war, something had begun to corrupt segments of the Dark Angels from within. Back on Caliban, the once proud homeworld of the Dark Angels, which had been shrouded in the unfathomable depths of warp storms since almost the beginnings of the Horus Heresy, was now primed for the return of their Primarch, Lionel Johnson. However, little did the Primarch and his loyal sons know that within Caliban's embrace, it seemed, betrayal had begun to unfold. Upon their arrival in orbit, the Dark Angels were met not with the open arms of their kin, but rather the hail of gunfire from their own garrison. Bewildered and feeling betrayed beyond all reason, Lionel Johnson sought answers amidst the chaos, only to uncover a sinister plot masterminded by his second in command, and all but father figure, Luther. It seems that Luther had been consumed by bitterness and resentment, which had sown the seeds to allow himself to be corrupted by Chaos's treacherous embrace, which led to Luther using trickery to convince many of the still loyal Dark Angels on Caliban to believe that they had been betrayed, and become what would eventually be known as the Fallen, leading to their attack on their Primarch. What followed was a titanic clash, in large part due to Luther and the Lion both having access to some of the most powerful and dangerous relics that the Imperium had decided to hide. This battle would determine the fate of Caliban and the Dark Angels themselves, and amidst the traitorous roar of orbital bombardments and the crackling energies of the ruinous powers now turned from Terra to Caliban, the Lion and Luther would confront each other on the once proud world of Caliban, which would be torn asunder, its very essence almost entirely consumed by the flames of betrayal. Yet amidst this devastation, it seems that the Lion's body had become lost amidst the chaos, his fate unknown to many of the Dark Angels, leaving behind only whispers of his ultimate destiny. And as the dust settled on Caliban, only ruins remained. A mere fragment of the planet would now serve as a mobile station, a bastion for the First Legion, and upon this shard of the planet, a fortress monastery would be left standing. Now, it is important to understand that at the end of the Horus Heresy, even though they were battered, the loyalists overall came out better than the traitors did in many respects, and they were angry. So they would embark on a crusade of redemption and destruction known as the Great Scouring. And in this monumental campaign, they would hunt down and wage wars unlike anything that had been waged before against the Traitor Legions, with the desire of purging every shred of their taint from every single corner of the Imperium, bar none. Everyone who had aided the traitors would be branded as excommunicato traitores by imperial decree, and they would be forced to flee into the Eye of Terror in order to hide amongst the nightmarish realms of the gods of chaos. This is in large part due to the Imperium sparing no effort to erase all traces of their existence. The homeworlds of many of the traitors expunged from reality, destroyed, leveled, to the point that some traitor Primarchs had to attempt to recreate their homeworlds in the warp. From the charred ruins of Istvan V to the cursed lands of Davin, the forces of chaos were hunted relentlessly. Worlds scoured clean, their populations annihilated in the name of purity. This includes those who served alongside the traitors due to being forced, not just those corrupted minions of Horus's legions. Even the Dark Mechanicum who had rebelled, and the twisted remnants of the Imperial army who had sided with the traitors, would be purged without mercy. No chance for redemption, no ability to return. But the scars of the heresy ran deep and echoed across the stars for solar decades to come. And though loyalist legions had been ravaged during the drop site massacre on Istvan V, they sought to rebuild and reform, yet they would forever bear the burdens of their losses. In order to prevent an event such as the heresy from ever happening again, the Codex Astartes was penned by the visionary Primarch Roboute Guilliman, and this would create a new era of warfare, redefining how Space Marines would function. The legions would be sundered into chapters, and the chapters would become significantly more independent and flexible. This was in large part due to Roboute Guilliman gaining the reins of control after the Emperor's internment into the Golden Throne, as he was declared Lord Commander of the Imperium and the Imperial Regent, with a significant amount of support from his loyal brothers, even those who loathed him for sundering their legions after all their efforts to defend humanity. Yet under his guidance, the Imperium began to rebuild, hopeful for a brighter future amidst the ever-encroaching darkness of the galaxy. However, the Horus Heresy had shown the inherent fractures in humanity, and even in humanity's greatest empire would this have long-standing repercussions, including the burgeoning emergence of religion within the Imperium, which ironically enough would be a unifying force that had allowed the Imperium to survive the darkest days of the heresy, and would later be the fabric which would hold humanity together and become a weapon against the forces of chaos, all despite the Emperor's efforts to stamp any and all forms of religion out of existence. Now, another rather monumentous incident that occurred shortly after the heresy would happen on the planet of Escador, a rather remote and isolated, desolate world where two Primarchs would clash once again. These were Roboute Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines Legion, and his brother, the Primarch Alfarius of the Alpha Legion. And while engaged in combat, Guilliman was under the false impression that this was Alfarius. However, records would show it was in fact Omegon, who had assumed his brother's identity following Alfarius' demise at the hands of Rogal Dorn during their battle on Pluto. And eventually, Alfarius, or rather Omegon, would fall, his life extinguished, or potentially it was a very skilled Alpha Legionnaire who had been changed in order to play the role of Alfarius. However, this was a victory for the Ultramarines, yet it was fleeting, because as they celebrated their triumph, they found themselves beset on all sides by a cunning attack from the Alpha Legion, who had struck the moment their Primarch had been bested, and they were even able to bolster their fierce resistance against the Imperium with the natives of Escador. However, due to being faced with overwhelming odds, Guilliman made the difficult decision to retreat. After days upon days of fighting, his forces were battered but unbroken, and from the safety of their void ships they would unleash a barrage upon their elusive foes, seeking not only to break the resolve of their enemies, but to secure victory through an overwhelming and unmitigated display of firepower. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, the Alpha Legion proved to be too elusive for this to function as planned. And in the aftermath of the battle, as the smoke cleared, the confounding nature of the Alpha Legion left even Guilliman wondering if he had truly been victorious against Alfarius, or if this had been another of his brother's many ruses. Another of the most notable incidents to occur shortly after the end of the heresy was one that some refused to believe ever happened, all the while lamenting their favorite son of the Emperor. This was the Iron Cage, and it unfolded on the war-torn world of Astartes IV, where the Imperial fists would clash against their brutal sworn enemies, the Iron Warriors. And this conflict stands as a testament to the fallibility of even the most stoic of Primarchs, as it seems Dorn would lose almost all self-control and charge in, and this occurred at the height of the Great Scouring, so almost the entirety of the Imperial Fists Legion descended upon Astartes IV, their sights set on besieging one of the most formidable fortresses ever erected by the Iron Warriors. This assault force was led by their Primarch Rogal Dorn, as the Imperial Fists had vowed to crush the Iron Warriors' forces and reclaim the world in the name of the Emperor. But little did they know that the Iron Warriors had lain a series of cunning traps, turning the very planet itself into a veritable fortress. Caught in the jaws of the elaborate schemes that the Iron Warriors had set about, the Imperial Fists found themselves struggling tooth and nail, losing vast amounts of the Legion, since they had not been prepared to fight such a well-defended enemy stronghold. However, despite unacceptable casualty rates, the Imperial Fists refused to yield, their determination being unshakable in the face of this particular adversary. Yet, with their ammunition exhausted, they would be forced to resort to the brutal hand-to-hand combat that was more synonymous with the Blood Angels and the World Eaters. The trenches of the very fortress they now fought for flowed with rivers of blood as bodies would slowly inflate and decompose. Yet even as defeat seemed inevitable for the Imperial Fists, salvation would arrive in the form of the Ultramarines Legion, led by Roboute Guilliman, and it was with their intervention that the Iron Warriors would be driven from the planet, sparing both legions from what seemed to be mutual annihilation. However, the scars of the Iron Cage would run deep within what was left of the Legion, as the Imperial Fists had been whittled down to an echo of what they once were, this being one of Rogal Dorn's greatest failures, as the Iron Cage proved to be transformative for the Imperial Fists, shaping the very existence and character of the survivors for millennia to come. In the aftermath of this event, Rogal Dorn's staunch resistance to Guilliman's vision for dividing the Space Marine legions into chapters waned significantly, in essence allowing the man to acquiesce to his brother's demands, despite his own desires to protest, due to being allowed no other choice. This has led to the belief that Rogal Dorn intentionally stepped into the trap set by the Iron Warriors in order to force his own hand without losing any face. Now, on the eastern fringes of the galaxy, the Night Lords, driven by the twisted visions and ideologies of their Primarch, Konrad Curze, would embark on a campaign of terror and unremitted genocide unlike any seen before. Unlike their fellow Traitor Legions who fled into the depths of the Eye of Terror, the Night Lords would remain united, their resolve and identity unbroken by defeat. And with ruthless efficiency, they would spread a wave of violence and horror across the eastern fringes of the galaxy, leaving entire worlds bathed in the blood of the innocent. So much flesh would be torn asunder that an entire world may be cloaked in it. This was a testament of what the Night Lords were capable of if left to their own devices. However, it would be during this incident that a figure would emerge, known as Shen, a Calidus assassin of the Officio Assassinorum, who would make their mark on history. As she infiltrated the Night Lord's stronghold on Sasgula, she would confront Primarch Konrad Curze by herself in a battle that could have potentially decided the fates of millions, or so some records say, while others detail Curze's fatalism causing him to accept the assassin's blade into himself, allowing Shen to strike a fatal blow, ending Curze's reign of terror, and bringing an end to the Night Haunter and his Night Lords' uncontrolled rampages for what at the time was the foreseeable future. Yet, even in death, Konrad Curze's legacy endured, as it is said that through welcoming his demise, he freed his legion from his own fatalistic beliefs, allowing them to be marked not by his passing, but by the innate inborn desires that he had instilled upon them. However, from here, the loyalists would all but corral the Night Lords into the Eye of Terror, with a force of multiple legions descending down upon them like a ravenous horde, slaying many, but not succeeding in eviscerating the legion as a whole. However, all the conflicts were not just loyalist against traitor, because on the twisted and unruly landscape of the demon world known as Scalathrax, two traitor legions would clash against each other. The world was desired both by the Emperor's children, for it had a large amount of Eldari soul stones, and it was their belief that this would be a veritable feast for she who thirsts, and the World Eaters, who had selected this planet as a base of operations. And at the heart of this brutal conflict was where Karn, the Eliquary of Angron, the champion of Khorne and the 8th captain of the 12th Legion, would gain his legendary moniker of Karn the Betrayer. As an unending battle raged on, and a frigid night of unimaginable cold descended on Scalathrax. It appeared as if the World Eaters and the Emperor's children would have reached a temporary truce in order to rest and recuperate before returning to battle once the cold winds passed. However, driven by madness and a true, undeniable devotion to his patron god Khorne, Kharn the Betrayer unleashed his fury upon his fellow World Eaters, picking up his flamer and burning down all his allies' housings, chastising them for not continuing to fight and for displeasing their god. And as this went on, he would continue to tear apart both friend and foe with the legendary chain axe Gorechild. All those who refused to fight would be cut down by Gorechild as the streets were painted red. And it was at this moment that Kharn the Betrayer truly became Khorne's favorite mortal, becoming a veritable harbinger of death and destruction who left nothing but carnage in his wake. And as the flames engulfed the night, this would be the final time the World Eaters were a singular solidified legion. However, Kharn's actions did prove fruitful, as not only did the World Eaters tear themselves apart, but the Emperor's children were also savagely ravaged in this desperate struggle for survival. However, the most important aspect of the legacy of Scalathrax was the World Eaters permanently becoming a series of scattered warbands, each attempting to worship Khorne in their own way. Another of the earth-shaking moments post the heresy was the conflict between Magnus the Red and Leman Russ on the shrine world of Graham. It was here that the traitorous Thousand Sons would launch their assault on the Space Wolves in order to settle old scores, all the while seeking to desecrate the shrine world, which had been made in honor of a wolf lord who had sacrificed themselves for Leman Russ. And in this conflict, Leman Russ would attempt to use the Spear of Russ in order to be able to match the powers of the now demon Primarch, Magnus the Red. And as the dust settled, the shrine world stood. Though bearing scars, it would remain as a symbol of the Space Wolves' unyielding tenacity. One of the most stark changes from pre-heresy to post-heresy would be witnessed amongst the cold expanse of the Nostromo system. This was the home system of the Night Lords, where the Blood Angels' Retribution Fleet embarked on an investigation of the moon of Tenebor. As the Space Marines of the 33rd Company would descend upon Tenebor, they were met with a chilling sight: a reinforced Void Station, which was once a bastion of strength, lie gutted and lifeless, in essence left as a silent witness to an unknown calamity. Even though the data cores of the station were damaged beyond almost all repair, the Blood Angels were able to find out that this was caused by a brutal assault by a Black Shield force, which left nothing but death in its wake. However, the mystery would only deepen further still when evidence came to light on a distant hive world by the name of Cairn. There, amidst the ruins of a once thriving civilization, they would find that rogue traitor Erasmus Sake unearthed clues of an apparent Astartes force which was near legion in size, which was working in secrecy, destroying everything they could, then leaving like phantoms in the night just as quickly as they descended. And it seems, in this world, they had sealed all the inhabitants of the hive cities as deep as they could within the world, leaving them to perish, slowly but surely. As the pieces of this puzzle began to coalesce, one question would remain: what was the origin of this mysterious Black Shield's fleet? And what dark purpose drove them on their relentless march across the Nostromo system? Later, within the remote Dominion of Storms, a task force of Ultramarines legionaries comprised of the battle-hardened survivors from the 19th, the 48th, and the 207th Destroyer cadres embarked on a daring mission to confront a renegade force of word-bearers. Their target was specifically to take out a Gloriana-class battleship known as the Chronicle of Ashes. As the Ultramarines would engage the renegade word-bearers, a fierce battle would ensue, as furious boarding actions would occur over the span of 2 solar days. Nearly 300 Astartes would descend upon the Chronicle of Ashes, and their bolter fire irrevocably changed the vessel. As they swept through the labyrinthian corridors, wiping out any resistance they came upon, and against overwhelming odds, they were able to overcome the traitor marines and gain a vessel for the Imperium. Yet amidst the chaos of battle, a startling discovery was made. Within the vaulted halls of the Chronicle of Ashes, amidst its upper decks, they uncovered a relic of the past, an ancient account written in the twisted tongues of ancient Cloichus, the word-bearer's homeworld. Within its pages was a treasure trove of secrets, revealing truths long concealed from the eyes of Imperial scholars, including the harrowing tale of Primarch Lorgar and his descent into the abyss of chaos. With the capture of the Chronicle of Ashes, it seemed that the Ultramarines lay claim to more than just a vessel of war, which would be cleansed and rededicated as Lex Talionis, a symbol of their triumph over the darkness. But they gained a key foothold into how chaos operated and a new avenue of investigation, one which had previously been restricted from all loyalist space marines. Eventually, the loyalists would get to planets such as Forge World Pampar 5, which had been a key point for munition supply and manufacture of weapons for the traitors, and Pampor would quickly become the front lines of a near unending assault. Its skies would be darkened by the smoke of battle, blotting out the sun, as the blood of countless warriors would stain its ground ever red. It would be in the year 019 M31 that the system would witness this catastrophic warfare as the Loyalists launched a relentless campaign to clear the entire planet of all life and free it from the clutches of traitors. The Third Battle of Pampor showed that the Loyalists would venture forth and reclaim all that they could, no matter the cost. Within the Nostromo sector, the Blood Angels Reclamation Task Force would embark to reconquer the Shroud of Eventide, a vessel of the traitorous legions. This task force would be led, in particular, by the warriors of the 9th Legion, now denoted as the Angels Vermilion, and their task force set its sights on the space hulk known as the Crimson Intent, a relic of the Night Lord's grim history. Their objective was clear: salvage the remains, the Shroud of Eventide, and breathe new life into its tainted hull. And throughout this, the 9th Bloodline would confront the twisted remains of their fallen Space Marine kin, and they even succeeded in reclaiming the vessel, dedicating it to the service of both the fallen Sanguinius and the Emperor himself. Yet they too would witness the mysterious Astartes Black Shield force that roamed the sector, and as the 9th Bloodline scoured the wreckage and slew any traitors that they found, they came ever closer to finding out the truth behind the elusive Black Shields. And it would be around 021 M31 that Roboute Guilliman, the esteemed Primarch of the Ultramarines and the Lord Commander of the Imperium, would finally achieve the culmination of a lifetime of work, the completion and the distribution of the Codex Astartes. This was a magnum opus, a tome of unparalleled significance, which would serve as a beacon of order amidst the chaos of war. Within its pages, Guilliman meticulously outlined a new paradigm for the organization and tactics of all Loyalist Space Marine chapters, both present and future, drawing upon his centuries of wisdom and his chapters' experiences and strategic insights to craft the Codex Astartes, as it would be a blueprint for the salvation of the Imperium, guiding the actions of its warriors across the stars, some more than others. Central to Guilliman's vision was the restructuring and shattering of the Legions Astartes. The already decimated legions from the Dropsite Massacre were unable to resist, and many of them even aligned with the thinking of Guilliman, as they had been struggling to craft enough gene seed to supply legion numbers in any actionable way. So upon this, new chapters would rise, and animosity would build within these chapters. As honors were stripped, titles laid bare, cousin turned to stranger, and brother to cousin. To some, the Codex Astartes was salvation. To others, Guilliman would be viewed as a butcher, succeeding with a scalpel where Horus had failed with a blade. This butchery was explained as necessary because the legions would no longer stand as monolithic entities vulnerable to the whims of tyrants and demagogues. Instead, the designation of 1,000 Astartes chapters would allow any singular force to be overwhelmed by those surrounding it. The significance of the Codex Astartes cannot be overestimated, as its edicts served as the bulwark against the forces of corruption and heresy for centuries to come, and it served as an assurance that the awesome power of the Legions Astartes would never again be wielded by a single individual, reassuring the citizens of the Imperium that their angels would no longer be bared in such numbers against them. This would lead to the Second Founding, an event which marked the reorganization of the loyalists' legions that still remained into smaller, more manageable formations known as chapters. Each chapter would comprise of 1,000 Space Marines, no more, no less. And the rationale behind this was clear, preventing the concentration of power that had led to the devastation that was wrought by the traitorous legions. It was believed that by dispersing the strength of the Space Marines in forces across multiple chapters, the Imperium ensured that no single individual could ever again wield the unchecked might of an entire legion. In total, in this second founding, 23 new Space Marine chapters were forged from the ashes of the old legions, each tasked with upholding the honor and duty of the Emperor's most loyal warriors. Yet amidst this reorganization, the original names of the loyalist legions were preserved. These chapters would serve as testaments to the storied legacies of the bloodlines. Amidst this birth of new chapters lurked the clandestine establishment of many of the Grey Knights' practices, as they had been crafted in secrecy by Malcador the Sigillite, the Regent of Terra, as a chapter solely comprised of psychers, which would be hidden away on the moon of Saturn, known as Titan. Within a pocket dimension of the Imperium, the Grey Knight's foundation was shielded from Horus and the prying eyes of his minions. This allowed the forces of the Grey Knights to slowly mature and grow in strength, in order to have an actionable force that was ready and seasoned for duty, eventually emerging much later as the vanguard of the Ordo Malleus, the branch of the Inquisition known for their dedicated warfare against the demonic threats of chaos. After the Horus Heresy, Primarch Corvus Corax, the leader of the Raven Guard, had felt rather guilty for the loss of many of his sons, along with the consequences of the Raven Guard's ambitious Space Marine augmentation program. And due to the remorse and guilt Corax felt, for a time he would retreat into the solitude of his personal chamber within the Raven Spire on Deliverance. Here, Corax sought deep introspection, where he had been haunted with the weight of his decisions, and he beseeched the memory of the recently ascended Emperor for absolution, yet he found no respite from his anguish. This caused him to act on the need for redemption rather than cold calculated logic. And exactly 1 year after his self-imposed seclusion, Primarch Corvus Corax would depart aboard a transport bound to the depths of the Eye of Terror. The fate of Corvus Corax for a long time would remain unknown, as his ultimate destination was obscured by uncertainty. However, upon his departure from Deliverance, the last word spoken to any of his sons would be the haunting refrain, "Nevermore." Yet, currently in the 41st millennium, there have been many whispers and conjecture about the Raven Lord's final odyssey, and it seems there is some evidence that he has now become a creature of the warp, freed from his mortal coil, eternally stalking Lorgar, constantly hunting down the sons of Cloychus. All the while, the legacy of the Raven Guard would slowly be rebuilt by those who were left. Unfortunately, the Raven Guard would continue to suffer more and more, as eventually, within Segmentum Tempestus, an individual known as Diant Mal would emerge, and he would amass an assault upon Amara Prime. There, in the swirling nebula and the debris fields of the future Ophrys sector, he would forge an alliance between a motley crew of renegades, mutants, heretics, and individuals who would later coalesce and become christened the Shadowed Ones. And this would lead to the Battle of Lix and the devastation known as the Scourge of Diant Carbane. For solar decades, they wielded terror as their weapon, using tactics akin to the Night Lords. And through a series of conflicts, they would humble the remaining Raven Guard further still. But eventually they would run into the beings who had just awakened to a galaxy seemingly changed. The Necrons, creatures of ancient living metal, awoke. This was the Byanika dynasty, which emerged to challenge Mal's domain. And it seems they were all but eviscerated, as the Shadowed Ones and Diant Mal himself seemed to have vanished off the face of history. So, in an unintended turn of events, it seemed the Necrons had acted as allies to the Raven Guard. And as the Great Scouring continued into 032M31, the Ultramarines set their sights on the world known as Koichus, which had been tainted by the dark machinations of the Word-Bearers. Upon their arrival, the Ultramarines were greeted by a scene of utter devastation. A world that was scarred by the horrors of betrayal, its once thriving industries reduced to rubble, its people teetering on the edge of oblivion. In the wake of Horus Heresy and the insidious spread of chaos, the newly formed Inquisition decreed Koichus as unfit for redemption, which meant the Ultramarines would have to unleash the wrath of Exterminatus on the beleaguered planet and the few souls that remained, as the mighty battle barge Octavius rained down cyclonic torpedoes upon the surface of the world, rendering the already fragile geological makeup of the planet not under its onslaught. Today, Koichus only exists as a memory, a shattered remnant lost to galactic history. As this went on, the rather distant Primarch of the White Scars, Jaghatai Khan, would embark on a fateful journey into the heart of darkness. Legends tell us of the Khan's relentless pursuit of the Drukhari, also known as the Dark Eldar, denizens of the Webway, who had wrought havoc upon Mundus Prime in the wake of the Battle of Chorus V. With his first Brotherhood by his side, the Khan would venture into a warp gate in hot pursuit of the treacherous Drukhari who had so angered him. And it seems his fate, like many of the Primarchs, would be lost to the sands of time. What transpired in the depths of the Webway remains a haunting secret. The question of, did the Primarch succumb to the maddening embrace of the Webway and become forever lost to its unforgiving currents and infinite expanses? Or was he ensnared by the sinister machinations of the vile Xenos tyrants and forever sealed his fate in chains of dark torment? However, amidst the uncertainty, a glimmer of hope seems to endure as the White Scars cling to the belief that the Kagan still roams the cosmos, his indomitable spirit unbroken by the passage of eons. As they whisper tales of his eternal hunt, a solitary figure traversing the infinite labyrinthian pathways of the Webway, ever vigilant against the encroaching shadows. For the White Scars and their successors, the legacy of Jaghatai Khan lives on, a beacon of hope for a great resurgence in a galaxy gripped by darkness, as they await the day their Primarch shall return. After the sundering of the legions, Roboute Guilliman would lead the Ultramarines chapter for another standard century, and it was during this period of time where he would show himself as a true leader amongst men, gaining the adoration amongst countless souls in the Imperium. As Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent, Guilliman steered humanity through the treacherous waters of the post-heresy turmoil. With the traitors routed and the Emperor's fate now sealed on the Golden Throne, the Imperium had been on the brink of collapse, yet Guilliman's strategic brilliance and unwavering resolve held the fractious realms together. However, fate had other plans for the valiant hero, as he would eventually engage in a fateful void battle against the Emperor's children's flagship, the Pride of the Emperor. Guilliman would be confronted by his brother turned foe, the transfigured demon Primarch Fulgrim, and in a cruel twist of fate, Guilliman fell victim to Fulgrim's treacherous poisoned blade. Yet even amidst death's grip, Guilliman would endure, his mortal remains enshrouded in a stasis field on the hallowed grounds of Macragge's Temple of Correction, awaiting the day he would return to lead the Imperium once more. But as the wheels of destiny were ever turning, that time would arrive in the year 999 M41. through the divine intervention of the Emperor and the technological prowess of Belisarius Cawl, along with the power of the Eldari god Yenid, Guilliman was resurrected from his slumber, once more returning to the fray of battle in order to lead humanity back from the brink once more. In the twilight hours of what would become known as the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, a solemn occasion which marked the triumph of the Emperor over Horus during the Siege of Terra, Primarch Leman Russ, while surrounded by his loyal wolf lords, convened a grand feast on the hallowed halls of the Fang. Yet amidst the revelry, a palpable unease gripped the Primarch's noble countenance, his gaze fixed upon the distant horizon, as Russ was overtaken by a trance-like state which befuddled his sons. In a moment which would echo throughout the ages, Russ would besiege his trusted wolf guard and closest confidants to accompany him, save for his faithful champion, Bjorn the Fell-Handed, as the Primarch would depart from the Great Hall with his retinue in tow, leaving behind the assembly of space wolves. The mystery of Russ's disappearance would endure as a testament to the mysterious machinations of the Emperor, as through the ages the saga has been recounted by none other than Bjorn the Fell-Handed, now a venerable dreadnought whose wisdom has transcended the passage of time for millennia, as the space wolves await the return of their liege in a time that they believe would become known as the Wolf Times, where their king shall return for a final battle against the forces of darkness. It would not be until year 781 M31 that Abaddon the Despoiler, the heir to the mantle of War Master, following the demise of Horus Heresy, would unleash the first of the 14 Black Crusades upon the Imperium, with Cadia as its focal point. This malevolent onslaught marked the opening of Abaddon's gambit in a series of relentless pursuits for galactic domination. Yet despite the fervent onslaught of the First Black Crusade, the bulwarks of the Cadian Gate held fast, thwarting the Despoiler's conquest. However, undeterred by defeat due to Abaddon harboring a tenacity unlike any seen through the ages, he would embark on a series of campaigns titled the Long War. And beneath the veneer of failure, each Black Crusade would serve as a sinister overture in unraveling the fabric of reality itself, as Abaddon, in a quest for vengeance, would vow to sunder the barriers of the Cadian Gate and carve a crimson tapestry straight through the Imperium's very heart. And amidst this maelstrom of war, the valiant Primarch Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, would confront his own destiny on the battlefield, leading a daring assault against a Chaos Armada. And as Dorn's actions would defy the odds and strike a sundering blow on the encroaching Dark Armada, it would seem that not all would go as planned, as during the crescendo of this attack, Dorn's fate would become shrouded in uncertainty, his valiant charge culminating in the desperate struggle on board an accursed vessel known as the Sword of Sacrilege, where in the aftermath of the battle, the Imperial Fists, who functioned as the custodians of Dorn's legacy, discovered only fragments of their Primarch's armor, along with a severed hand, which has served as a symbol for the Imperial Fists ever since. Upon the now skeletal fist, every chapter master of the Imperial Fists has scrawled their name onto the bones of the Praetorian of Terra. And while some believe Dorn survived and will return once again, many are assured of his penultimate fate. Amidst the aftermath of the Siege of Terra, it seemed a clandestine movement had emerged within the depths of humanity, one steeped in secrecy and religious reverence for the Emperor. But eventually, in year 900 M31, a revered figure known as Factidus, who was a decorated veteran of the Imperial Army, would clandestinely establish the Temple of the Savior Emperor upon Terra, as he would embrace defying the tenets of the Imperial truth and ignite the formal creation of a religion devoted to the Emperor of mankind. From the humble origins, the Temple of the Savior blossomed into a beacon of faith. Its teachings would echo across the Imperium, propagated by the faithful servants of the Imperialis Auxilia, the Armada Imperialis, and later the Astra Militarum and the Imperial Navy. The fervor of the God Emperor's worship would spread like wildfire, birthing the Adeptus Ministorum, which would become the spiritual authority of the Imperium and the very center of the imperial governance and the center of the identity of humanity as a whole. As it began to snowball, the echoes of the imperial truth would fade into obscurity and be supplanted by the resounding chorus of devotion, whose origins had in fact been derived from the last remnants of the Latitio Divinatum, Lorgar's very founding text, the one which had had him censored by the Emperor. In conclusion, it seems that Lorgar had actually won. His faith, his devotion, the religion he sought to create in the name of the Emperor, had supplanted the imperial truth, much to the chagrin of the current Demon Primarch. If you watched until the end, I would really like to ask you if you could subscribe.